broken at their offices. And worst of all, a gas line was even severed at the home of the lawmaker's brother. And the threats just keep on coming.
I hope you die.
There are millions of people across the country who wish you ill.
You're a cowardly punk, Stupak. That's what you are. You and your family are scum.
I mean, it's as if they're so angry the Armageddon didn't actually happen after the signing of the bill that they've just decided to bring it on themselves. So what's really going on? Is America falling apart at the seams, or are these kinds of actions truly American? Well, here to discuss it with me, I have Catherine Mangu-Ward from Reason Magazine, Jake Brewer, the campaign director for the Sunlight Foundation, and Liz Mayer, a conservative blogger. Thanks for being here, all of you. My first question is, what the hell is going on? It's like chaos out there. I don't understand when people are spitting at lawmakers, they're smashing windows. To cut a gas line, these are like serious death threats out there. What's happening?
I guess, with any debate, you have a little pocket of crazy. And this is true everywhere. This is true in every place. I know that I get emails several times a week wishing ill on my friends, my family, my dog, which I don't even have a dog. And, I think the crazies just came out of the woodwork a little.
I mean, I get some crazies too, but this seems massive to me. This is really on a massive scale, or maybe is that just the way the media is playing it up?
I think it's at least well covered. I think it certainly makes for a good storyline in the wake of a massive bill that a lot of people felt very strongly about one way or the other. And you're seeing people come out again very strongly for and very strongly against, and actually both of those things rising at the same time. And we've got a little crazy town developing. I mean, that's kind of, I think, relatively normal if you look over the course of American history when we have big things happen.
I think that's true, and I think that, the media loves a good controversy, and this is no exception. But I also think, there's a lot of discussion that I'm hearing about whether we've really gone overboard this time and whether this is really completely excessive and, really on a sort of historically unparalleled scale. I mean, I do think that it's worth remembering that there is a time in our history where we had, political fights playing out in the form of duels. We don't have that happening, and that's good. But certainly people are getting a little out of hand. I think that there are some people who are crossing a line. Some in terms of taste and some in terms of legality. And people need to sort of get a better grip on their horses, I think, for lack of a better term.
Yeah. Threats are against the law, period. I mean, that there's no condoning that.
It's tasteless, it's classless, it's trashy, and I guess it's kind of scary. But who is really behind it? I mean, are these just some, a few nuts out there that are on the fringes, or do you think somebody is actually pushing for this? Could it be the Tea Partiers? Could it be the Republican Party? Could it be Fox News?
I'm going to make a strong case for just nuts. I think sometimes, a cigar is just a cigar. Sometimes nuts are just nuts. And in this particular case, certainly some of the threats have been real and really scary. But there's also been, I think, a kind of ridiculous degree of Me Too-ism. A couple real threats happen. That's a big deal. But now we're getting people saying, oh, my God, I got a profanity-laced letter to my office. And if you don't get a profanity-laced letter every single day in your office as a congressman, the American people are not doing their job. So,
and you're probably doing something wrong, too.
I was going to say, you're probably not. You probably haven't, taken a vote recently. Or,
The scary thing with just nuts, though, and this is what I think it concerns me a little bit, is that, the only thing that stops violence, for instance, we know this from anything working, in the Middle East, for instance, the thing that will stop Islamic violence is Islamic leaders coming up and saying, hey, we got to stop this. It's not when Christian leaders say, hey, don't do that to us, right? It's when somebody from within a group says, we got to back off. And if it's just nutso people, that's a little concerning, simply because there's not leadership within that to kind of rein it back in.
The nuts union isn't going to go on strike.
The nuts union doesn't want to stop. That's the thing. They want Me Too.
Well, what's interesting here is, John Boehner has come out. I think the Tea Party, some of the leaders of the Tea Partiers have come out and said that they don't condone violence, that they're not happy with this. But let's look at the Republican Party now. Are they going to be trapped because of these people, because of the anger? For the most part, that does extend across a good part of America. And even if they're not the ones that are going out there smashing windows, whatever, being crazy, then are the leaders going to be trapped? Because if they in any way do back down or trying to be, are not supporting the crazies, I guess, then can they not act? Can they not do their jobs?
I mean, I think, to be honest, there is a concern that I have as a Republican about the possibility that the party increasingly gets branded as being home to this level of extremism. I think we've seen that with previous debates. You know, there was a very major effort, obviously, with all of the town halls when that was going on, for Democrats, frankly, to step up and claim that this was Republican AstroTurf, and some of the worst things that were happening were actually being led by Republicans. I think there's also been a fairly strong drive among certain quarters within the media to basically draw comparisons between the Republican Party and certain fringe elements, namely birthers, I think is one of the most obvious ones. I completely reject all of that. I mean, I'm a Republican. A lot of people that I know are Republicans. I don't think I know a single person who literally, legitimately thinks that Barack Obama is not entitled to be president and he's not eligible for that. That's perfectly ridiculous. But I think when you have enough discussion of that going on and there's enough controversy, it is possible, if people don't come out and reject that very forcefully, that they do end up getting branded by it. And that's one of the reasons I was very encouraged earlier today to see people like John Boehner stepping forward and condemning this in absolutely no uncertain terms and being very unequivocal about it. You know, that being said, I also know tonight that, Move On has apparently been going out and saying that this needs to be rejected unequivocally to sort of suggest that it hasn't been. And I think that if that continues, that is potentially a risk.
There's also the problem that it stops people from talking about the merits and demerits of the bill, right? If all of the coverage is about one guy with a sign, as it was before the bill was passed, and now all the coverage is about one guy with a pair of cable clippers, I guess.
Or whatever you use to do that kind of thing.
Or whatever you use.
The fact that we don't know, actually,
it distracts from sort of people really having a conversation about the bill and seeing as virtually everyone in the American political scene thinks that this bill still needs more work. Mm-hmm. It's not a topic that's done.
Yeah, and I think what's been most interesting for us, we run a website called opencongress.org, and the traffic to that site has spiked to its highest degree ever after the bill was passed, which I find a really interesting statistic. It wasn't before the bill was passed and people trying to learn more about how to engage with their congressmen. Well, they did do some of that, but it really was after the fact, what the hell is this thing doing to me, right? And I think people are really wondering that, and I think there's a lot of concern about what is going to happen next. And by talking more and more about the violent act, we're not talking about the many thousands of folks talking.
Do you think that Obama is just loving this moment? Is he just so happy that there are other distractions on the table, that people perhaps aren't focusing on the details of the bill or the fact that the Republicans are trying to change it? I want us all to listen to a little clip here where it sounds to me like he's taunting them. Can we play that, you guys?
Go for it.
They're actually going to run on a platform of repeal in November. You've been hearing that. And my attitude is, go for it.
Go for it. Do whatever you want. He doesn't care anymore. He thinks he's already won. Do you think that's true? Do you think Democrats have pretty much sealed the deal now? Are they going to be on a roll?
I think, Bill Clinton actually last summer predicted that as soon as the bill was passed, that approval for the bill would go up 20%. Hasn't gone up 20%, but we've certainly seen the actual poll numbers for it rise. I think, that certainly the politicians in the White House and in Congress are paying attention to that. And, strategically, it does not make a lot of sense for repeal to be the thing. I mean, if Barack Obama is the guy who's been championing this, is still the guy in the White House. All he has to do is veto something, even if there is a repeal act proposed. So strategically, it would not make a lot of sense for Republicans to run on that platform.
It's a little bit embarrassing if Obama is saying, all right, they're not paying attention to what's in the bill. It's not a good bill. I mean, I think that's, again, just the distraction point. But if people are happy about the fact that the story post-bill is not what is this bill going to do to our economy, what's it going to do to the way we get health care in this country, what's it going to do to medical innovation, it was a bad bill. And, you can cover that up all you want, but the bill's still going to go into effect. In the next 10 years, we're going to see what happened, whether or not we spent the next 10 weeks talking about a couple of races.
Is that really the Obama administration covering up, or is that something that's been the case all along? Whereas people really never knew the details. This was a huge bill. It's a little too complicated for average Americans. They're not going to go online and read the whole thing. It's just they do a bad job of selling it, and now essentially they don't really have to.
This bill has been online and available to the public more than any bill in maybe our history. So it's a little bit interesting to say that no one's had access to actually reading it. I think people are choosing not to.
No, that's what I'm saying, is how many people are actually taking the time out to go and read it?
Probably not very many. I think what's been most frustrating for me to watch is that the coverage after the bill is passed is now starting to say, well, here's what this bill means for you, right? And you see that after the fact. And so the relationship between citizens and the government is what's kind of broken down. That information channel is what's not well developed at this point.
And I think that's true, and I think that that's one of the risks here for Obama and for the Democrats, frankly. You know, we had a situation where there are numerous people that I know who tend to be much more Democrat favorable than Republican favorable walking into the beginning of all of this last week, who frankly were fairly supportive of the bill. And then as people started getting more and more upset and as more details started coming out, their opinion completely switched. And I think that's particularly been evident when you look at the debate surrounding the individual mandate. That's something that strikes an awful lot of people as completely noxious and completely contrary to, fundamental libertarian principles that I think a lot of people, whether they explicitly identify as a libertarian or not, I think that they do tend to hold. I think it's fairly fundamental to our way of thinking as Americans that, the government probably shouldn't be compelling you to spend money on what the same elected officials are basically saying is a bad product.
And Democrats at the same time are saying we still need to sell this. I mean, before the bill passed, David Axelrod said we have to pass it to know what's in it. Today, Mark Mellman, Democratic pollster, said, okay, now we have to sell the heck out of this bill.
Yeah.
And, it's because they haven't sold the American people on it, because they haven't convinced people.
But how many things have elected officials really passed that perhaps they knew was flawed? They always admitted that it's flawed, but they have to pass something.
I think
what they're doing their job
I think
for.
that's true, but I think it oftentimes does become a political liability further down the road. I mean, this is going to be the case, I think, much more than anything that we've seen passed recently. But I'm sure that the four of us could basically pick out a number of pieces of legislation recently where that has been true. I mean, I don't think if you looked at people's opinions of No Child Left Behind now versus when it was passed, they probably have changed. Same thing with Medicare Part D. Same thing with a lot of these massive expansions of government power. And I think that's something which, given where the public mood sits right now, Republicans are pretty comfortable with. I mean, certainly, I'll be forthright in saying that, I think that, political figures that I consult with and that I talk with are very comfortable walking into November with this. Ultimately, is it a very difficult threshold to reach in order to repeal the thing? Yes, it is. Do they feel that people are increasingly becoming aware of what's in the bill and they're not happy about it? Yes, they do.
I think it's pretty impossible to repeal it at this point because they would need more seats to repeal it than are going to be available in this coming election. So I just don't see it happening. But I'm happy, you brought up No Child Left Behind. I want to take us back to the Bush years. And did we ever? Just for a minute here. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to do it to you.
It feels that way.
But if we have to go back, did we ever see the same kind of backlash and the same kind of outcry, even when the war in Iraq was such a divisive issue? Did we see people sending out threats, smashing windows, and doing the same thing to lawmakers?
I think what was really interesting, the rise up of the liberal media, I think in particular, to kind of say these images of Barack Obama with the Hitler kind of images surrounding him, or kind of these different name calling things that happened throughout the last 6 months. And, there was a lot of uprising and they didn't like it very much. Let's just leave it at that. But it's really interesting. If you just go to Flickr, right? If you go to Flickr.com and you type in Bush plus Hitler, right? You will find literally thousands and thousands of photos of his image and those images, right? I mean, this is not the first time this happened.
Posters, though, of course.
No, I'm saying, but in general, there was uprising throughout this whole time. I think
but did we see it go as far? Did we see people take it as far in terms of being violent and this aggressive?
I will certainly say, having worked at the Republican National Committee during 2008, which was obviously the target of certain protests, I would not say that any of the protesters actually got particularly violent. There were certain instances of things being done that I think were arguably illegal. But I think, some of what we saw there was a lot of Code Pink activity and things of that nature. And, honestly, I'm not sure that it is particularly more appropriate to be showing up at a hearing on Capitol Hill and shoving hands covered in fake blood in Condoleezza Rice's face than it is to be, making sort of threats and screaming at people and using epithets. Do I like any of it? Do I think any of it is within the boundaries of, good taste? Do I think that there are norms and possibly laws in each of those cases that are being violated? Yeah, possibly. I mean, there's a bit of a distinction there, but I think it's certainly distasteful to a lot of people, and I think it crosses a line.
The coverage also of the sort of very widespread Bush hatred that existed during the Bush years was, listen, these people are extremists, but they represent a mood in the country, which is that people aren't very happy about what their president is doing. And I think it's pretty reasonable to interpret what's going on with the Tea Parties and with these, other recent incidents as, again, these are crazy people. They are uniquely crazy and special and separate, but they're also tapping to a mood in the country.
Definitely. I want to thank you all for joining me. Finally, my other interview is coming through. We got him on the line, but definitely something is going on here. I'm not sure what it is. I guess the way you put it, there is a mood in the country after